Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ben Rosie, and I'm a consultant at Mutual Ventures. For those who may not know us, we're currently the Department for Education's delivery partner for the Fostering Recruitment and Retention Programme. This is a national initiative designed to increase the number of foster carers by regionalising and strengthening the recruitment process. This afternoon, though, our focus is really on the heart of that programme, the children and young people who have experience of the care system and the foster carers who support them. So care experienced young people are disproportionately represented in NEET numbers, that's not in employment, education or training. And they face a unique set of challenges when entering the workforce and maintaining employment once through the door. Similarly, foster carers find their own sort of unique barriers when re-entering or maintaining their position in the workforce. As one of our panelists, James, said to me, and I'm paraphrasing incredibly badly, so I apologise. If we care about one group finding work, we really should care about both. So today's webinar will explore how employers play a vital role in addressing these challenges. We'll look at the specific barriers faced by care experienced young people and foster carers, and then share practical tips that employers can take to create a more inclusive workplace. My hope for the next hour is that everyone on the call comes away with at least one thing that they can do in their workplace. So to go through this today, I'm joined by a fantastic panel. I'll turn to each one of you to introduce yourselves, just a little bit about who you are, and a sentence or two about your organisations. James, can I start with you?
Thanks, Ben. Hi, so I'm James Copeland. I am the Assistant Director responsible for England at the Fostering Network. I'm also a former foster carer and have had experience working with NEET young people for several years, around a decade or so ago. So I bring a sort of both perspective of having lived some of this myself, both as an employee and caring for people who are potentially looking for work, and even this morning, a young man who was in care, trying to help him connect with somebody else, and then also from a national level of supporting foster carers and best practice across fostering services in the country.
Brilliant, thank you. Russell, can I turn to you next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Russell Winard, also former foster carer and CEO of a charity called Drive Forward Foundation, which works with care experienced young people to secure some of those employment, education and training outcomes that Ben mentioned.
Great, thank you very much. Gemma.
Hi, my name is Gemma Wilson. I'm a service manager for children in care and care experienced young people for Devon County Council's social care. So predominantly we work to support the teams that oversee our children in care from when they receive a care order, when they are in the care of the local authority permanently, up to the age of 18, but then beyond, so from the point at which they're allocated a personal advisor at 16 up to 25. So that's what my area of service covers.
Brilliant, thank you. Beth.
Hello, I'm Beth. I also work at Devon County Council with Gemma and Debbie. I work in the apprenticeships and early careers team. So obviously our focus is getting new employees into Devon via the route of early careers options, whether it's work experience, apprenticeships, T-levels, any of those things. But I do have a special focus on the care experience network. So I link very closely with them to, sort of create or find opportunities that are of interest to them and then support them into DCC as an employer and continue to work with them once they've started.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And last but not least, Debbie.
Hello, my name's Debbie Stafford. I work at Devon County Council with Gemma and Beth. I'm a Senior Economic Development Officer for Youth and Inclusion. So my work involves supporting young people with additional support needs into employment. And I do that by working closely with employers around more inclusive working environments and being disability confident. But also I oversee a number of employment and youth hubs across the county who link directly with young people looking for those opportunities in work.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you all for joining me today and everyone else in the audience as well. As we go, if you do have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and we'll have a bit of time at the end to go through them. So to get into it, Russell, can I begin with you? Could you provide a bit of background about why we're here talking about care experienced young people specifically and the unique challenges they face when entering the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you referenced it yourself that around 40% of care experienced young people are not in employment, education, or training. Now that compares to the general population, which is more like 13%. So 3 times more likely not to be in employment, education, or training. Now, we as a charity, we recognise that there are a whole set of barriers that care experienced young people can face. Education is one. Young people that have been moved multiple times, in fact, become the charity advocates for care experienced young people. Did some research on this recently, and they found that 13% of 16-year-olds were moved placement during their GCSE exams. That's atrocious. Yeah, how do we expect young people within care to be achieving the same sort of academic levels when we're moving them and creating instability? But beyond education, because we do work with a whole spectrum of care experienced young people. Some of them are at university, some of them are postgrads. So education isn't always a barrier, but there are other barriers such as the trauma that has been experienced as a young child, in some cases very young child, and the impact that that begins to have. We see low confidence, low self-esteem amongst care experienced young people, and the government really beginning to recognise that that is a key indicator of care experienced young people achieving outcomes, is increasing their level of confidence and self-esteem. Networks can be torn apart. So every time a placement is moved, the networks that have been built up, whether they be personal friendship networks or whether they be sort of professional networks, they're removed. Many care experienced young people don't have a network like a birth family where parents will make connections, will pass on opportunities. That generally doesn't exist, although I'm sure there are foster carers here on the call that are doing that, but there are many young people in care for who they don't have that. So, mental health, I mean, as we know, young people within care are disproportionately affected by mental health issues, diagnosed and undiagnosed, and that can cause challenges in the workplace. The other, if we see it from an employer's perspective, there are challenges around being able to support that young person as best as possible, and knowing just how that happens and what that looks like. And something we've heard from our young people directly is the level of unconscious bias that can exist in some workplaces, which it's not done purposefully, but when they know that this young person is a care leaver or care experienced, treated just ever so slightly differently to everybody else, and that creates uncomfortableness, and may mean that employment doesn't sustain for any sort of period of time. So that there are a range of challenges, Ben, and it's a really difficult position for a lot of care experienced young people to make that transition into employment without the support that a birth family might provide, those networks will provide, and not having had that early childhood trauma. That's the key.
Thank you. It's a sort of very, very challenging landscape there. James, if I can turn to you, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add there. And would you also be able to speak to the foster carers' perspective? Why is it so important to also consider them as part of the equation?
Absolutely. And I think Russell's touched on a lot of things, the instability that is caused for children, that sadly is something that's reflected across children's social care in the UK. Not just 16-year-olds, but throughout childhood and moving through, and the different connections that are built and lost. But if we care about trying to create opportunities for young people in the future, because we know that the world of employment and having that sense of structure is a wonderful protective factor for people going into the world and being able to contribute and have that stability in their own lives. We're not really setting children up the best for that if we've got a really unstable system behind that. And across the UK, we support around about 55,000 foster carers. in the role that they play in creating that stability. And the majority of children in care are over the age of 11 and moving towards 60, and the numbers in care increase. And obviously creating a sense of security for them so that they have that sort of base and understanding and connections so that they can go forward into the future with a chance of getting employment, and securing those things is really important. And indeed, potentially staying with their fostering families beyond the age of 18, so they've got that sense of stability going for that, is really crucial. But in order to do that, we need to also look at the people who are curating that sort of protective environment around children. So foster carers, and also it's Kinship Carers Week at the moment too as well, being able to support those who, grandparents, uncles, aunts, etc., those caring within the wider family, where actually being able to access employment for all of those individuals who need additional degrees of flexibility and understanding from their employers to create their stable base for life to be able to care is really critically important. And that's something that at the Fostering Network we care about, and have a scheme called Fostering Friendly Employers, which we have well over 100 or a few hundred fostering friendly employers, and 100 more or so in the pipeline to do that. And that's one of the things I'll be speaking a little bit more about later, and asking you guys to consider doing that. So you are doing both, and we're supporting those who care, and then also supporting those who will be ultimately the beneficiaries, the young people coming into adulthood and into employment.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've heard about some of the challenges that care experienced young people and foster carers face when moving into employment. So what can be done to make this transition easier? So delighted to introduce Gemma, Debbie and Beth, who will be talking us through their Positive About Care Experienced, or PACE model. It's a pioneering approach developed in Devon in partnership with Exeter College. The PACE model is designed to help employers create more inclusive workplaces and better career opportunities for care experienced young people. So let me hand over to you three. Let me just make sure that the technology is working. It worked in the run through. Let me get your slides up. Brilliant. Could everyone see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. Over to you three.
Thank you. And thank you, Russell and James as well, for that fantastic introduction there. So lovely to see you all today. I'm going to introduce the PACE programme, which is our employer support training programme that we have here in Devon. This is a programme that is a full day workshop. So we have been challenged with squeezing this into 15 minutes and a small number of slides. So it will be a whistle-stop tour, and I do hope you can catch it, but I do know that the slides will be available to you afterwards. Next slide, please. Okay, so what did we aspire for with the PACE programme? And that's already been introduced by Ben. And it was designed to look at creating strong links with employers and our care experienced young people across the county. As a corporate parent, we wanted to make sure that we were doing the best we possibly could by linking with those that we are partners with in our authority, but also local businesses. This initially came from a roundtable discussion with employers and with training providers, looking at how we could do more to create opportunities for our young people. Devon is a huge county. There are opportunities all over the place. Ultimately, it's about linking those opportunities with our young people, looking at what our young people are interested in, looking at what they want to do, and aligning that with the employers that are wanting to support them. We wanted to be able to help to engage employers more effectively, and looking at how we can pull in that we've got a really strong training team with our personal advisors that are specially for supporting people with education, training and employment. They are a fantastic little team. We wanted to link them together and use their skills and knowledge to support our employers as well as our young people. We were keen to create a support network of all of our employers that were interested in this, and with training providers, so we could look at having lots of different opportunities that looked at work experience, apprenticeships, different sorts of employment opportunities, and helping that support network support each other in that space, but also for them to receive training from us and ongoing mentoring. Next slide, please. So just briefly, what we do discuss on the workshop in much more detail is the impact of being in care for our young people. Lots of people have talked, they have preconceived notions about why a young person may be in care, and often compare them to other groups of young people, and often have their own ideas in their head as to why a young person may be where they are. we need to be considering, and just as Russell talked about earlier, the previous experiences of abuse and the trauma impact there. What does that look like for each young person? Because it is very individual. The placement instability, also already mentioned by Russell, and disruptive relationships with caregivers and their support networks. We know that from the care review that we need to be looking at what does each young person's support network look like for them when they reach 18? Who is there for them if they don't have their family, if they haven't had a stable relationship with any caregiver, or have been moved around multiple times and don't even have a network of friends? There is definitely for our young people, they are more at risk of peer violence and abuse as well as exploitation, and they may have gone missing various times over the course of their time in care, meaning that they will have missed out on not just education and those that care for them, but also to meet their health needs and anything else that they may have been granted in a stable care placement or with their own family. Next slide, please. So we don't just look at the reasons why young people may be in care, we also look at some more interesting facts around those that have been in care. I'm not going to read out every single name here, but I am going to give some examples, and when you do receive these slides, you can click on the link and it will take you straight there. So just out of interest, those people that have been in care, we've got sportsman and Chief Executive Officer Chris Akabusi. We have writer Professor Jeanette Winterson. We have Head of Research for Ofsted, Dr. Donna Neal, and Oscar-nominated actor Samantha Norton, as well as Baroness, TV producer, presenter and actor Floella Benjamin, David Dickinson, who is an antiques expert, John Fashanu, who is a presenter and footballer, Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, and sportswoman Fatima Whitbread, just to name but a few of those that people may be aware of who have gone on to excel in their area or field. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand over to Debbie for this one.
Yeah, so part of the PACE programme, as Gemma mentioned, is about equipping employers with some of those hints and tips for the future and how employers can adapt their existing processes to welcome more care experienced people into their business. So what we've tried to do here for this webinar is just pick out some of those practical hints and tips over the next couple of slides around recruitment and induction, and to make both of those more accessible and considerate to the needs of our young people. So if we start off looking at that kind of recruitment process, and we've broken that down into 4 stages. So if we think about the job description, sounds obvious, but we're all very fond of the jargon that we use in our particular services and sectors. So it's really about how can we use plain English within our job descriptions, and keeping them as short as possible, keeping them clear and factual and concise. And something else that we tend to do in the local authority as well as other areas is we do tend to focus on a list of qualifications, and as colleagues have mentioned already, you know, that education experience may have been interrupted for some of our young people, and they may not have those qualifications that are needed at the outset, but they can get those later on their journey. So can we focus on attitudinal traits and what that young person can bring to a role, rather than making that an essential requirement of that job description? And also thinking about how we provide that job description. Can that young person access it? Are there alternative formats that we can provide? Does it have to be through an online application process, or can the young person offer a video description that will still include the specification, but they can submit it in a different way? Then we think about how we advertise that vacancy, again, using plain English, keep it clear without some unnecessary wording, accessible language. And something that we've done that Beth may touch on later is considering a guaranteed interview scheme for young people who are in care or who have been in care. And, you know, if somebody applies for that role and they meet the essential requirements, can you then guarantee them an interview? Do you have, or can you offer more than one way in which that young person can apply? As I mentioned before, a video format, you could do a work trial or something called a supported internship. And always we would encourage an employer to add a named contact of a person that they can phone up and speak to if they're struggling with that application in the advert. So onto the application itself. Let's think about offering support. If it's an online application, some of the things that we may take for granted in terms of having access to a laptop or a network, that young person may not have that. So as an employer, can you offer that support for somebody maybe to come into your setting, to your premises, to complete an application? Could that be an in-person discussion beforehand to offer them some support, or through some coaching? What are you looking for from this vacancy, and can you support that young person to access that? Also try not to use, if possible, hypothetical or timed online scenarios. Again, this can be really off-putting for some young people. They may not have the experience or that family support to have experienced something like that before. So if we can avoid that, let's try and do that. And again, as I've mentioned, more than one method to apply. And then if we come on to the interview itself, can we contact the young person in advance? What are their potential barriers to attending that interview in person? Can they get there? What about the travel costs of getting there? Can we advise around what you would expect someone to wear to an interview? If you are interviewing online, does that young person have access to the software, to the laptop, to the network that they'll need to do that? Have they had experience in that? It can be, you know, an anxious situation for any of us, but even more so for some young people online. And can you think about how you would help that young person beforehand, before the interview, before doing that? If it's an in-person interview, how is that space set up? Is it accessible and non-confrontational? How can we make that space as friendly and as welcoming as possible? And Gemma's already mentioned about personal advisors. Would you encourage, or can you accept a personal advisor within that interview scenario? Can that young person be accompanied by their personal advisor or a job coach if they have one? And something else that we've encouraged our employers to do is guaranteeing feedback. Not always easy if you have a large number of applicants, but you know, if you can ring fence those that have come from a care leaver, can you provide that feedback to support them in their ongoing job search and to build their confidence and to learn from the experience? And always keep in contact. You know, if anything changes about that recruitment process, please keep that young person informed, and if deadlines change or anything else. So if we can have the next slide, please. So you've recruited, you successfully recruited a young person. You want to make that experience as welcoming and inclusive as possible. But let's not take for granted the support that that young person may have or have had in terms of that first day and that induction. So how can we make that as welcoming as possible? Let's provide that candidate, that young person, with the name and the contact details of who they can get in touch with even before day one. So can we touch base with that young person 2-3 times before that first day, check if they've got any questions and what to expect. Provide clear instructions around where they've got to go, when, who they're going to meet, and where they should meet that person before day one. And again, thinking about how are they going to get there? Is anyone going to accompany them, or can they accompany them? And just to kind of remove any of those barriers or anxiety that that young person may have beforehand if they don't have that family support structure in place that we may take for granted. What's expected of them? Can you provide a clear sense of that before they start? So is there anything around dress code? What will their itinerary look like on their first day? Who can you give them contact details for before they get there? And if they've got any problems, if something arises within their accommodation or anything else beforehand, can you provide the contact of somebody that they can get hold of? And also think about, it's about time, isn't it, and being considerate and what that young person may be experiencing on that day. So regardless of it's their first day in a new job, there may be other factors, contributing factors to maybe a high level of stress for them and anxiety in the early stages of their employment and even before they get there on that first day. So just thinking about how you can make any adjustments if necessary, and kind of try and alleviate those stress factors that that young person may be experiencing. And then we've just listed a whole list of things that you can think about that we may take for granted in terms of taking breaks or managing an inbox, organizing their desks, working effectively as part of a team. How do we kind of work with that young person and get to know them, and understand what some of their challenges are and how we can support them to understand the things that we take for granted within a workplace. And then lastly, think about the role of a buddy or a task manager. So in addition to their line manager, is there somebody else that you can assign to that young person who's just there in a kind of a peer support role, who's there to listen, and who's not their line manager? The next slide, please, and back to Gemma.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so what we usually do in our full-day workshop, also with the part that Debbie's just spoken about, is we do some activities that really bring these things to life. So, for example, the concept of a warm welcome. We do an activity where we get people to think about a particular scenario where someone is starting on the first day and what it feels like to walk into an office. We've got some young people that work with us that present some of these activities that really do bring it to life. What I'm going to just focus on here for a bit, and I will whistle through these next 4 slides because they are all about communication. We know that communication with anyone is vitally important, but for some of our care experience young people, there are some things we need to be really considering about how they may absorb things, how they may develop trust, and also be able to communicate effectively back to yourselves. So really get to know your young person, but also don't expect them to open up too quickly. They need to learn to trust you. And that can be developed by listening more and talking less, but also being open and honest when you do speak. Providing information in a range of formats. Debbie's just touched on that in terms of what we're looking at for other recruitment and the interview process. And also be thinking about if someone's getting frustrated and angry about something, what is that linked to? Don't take it personally. Have a little think about what it is that's brought about that anger and frustration. It may well be that they need something explaining to them again or putting in forward in a different way. Keep in touch and don't make promises that you can't keep. And please don't judge. Next slide, please. Think about being positive, even when your young person is not. And we all know how hard that is on a Monday morning. So, but that means that you're showing that you care. It's also showing that you're modeling behavior and modeling how you can act positively, even when you're under duress. But also don't accept when you see your young person at face value. Look at their body language and see if what they're saying matches with how they are presenting. Be real and be authentic and be yourself. You need to be able to do that in order to be open and honest. And think about being the parent in corporate parent. Be creative in your approach and think about activities and relationship building with not just yourself, but the rest of the team around that young person. And who can you include from their support network in that? But most of all, remember that all behaviour is communication. Next slide, please. So these will come through. That's perfect, thank you. Building confidence in communication, and that's about inspiring that trusted relationship, and that's going to come with time. But be confident yourself, but also make sure that you ask questions where you're not sure if your young person has understood what is requested of them, and build additional support and time into meetings exactly for this. Think about how you may need to put things forward in a different format, how you may have to say things a number of times and explain things in different ways. Be willing to learn from your young person and ask them about how they prefer to communicate, possibly when you've developed that relationship a little bit further, but also use how you are viewing each young person individually. Use a range of different creative approaches. And again, we've talked about different formats. Be thinking about how you need to reduce the ask on memory. This young person may have a whole heap of things going on outside of work that they also need to remember. So how are you going to help them remember things within their work role? Personal questions. Obviously, you do want to get to know your young person, but let them take the lead about what they want to share with you. And ask things such as, sorry, don't make assumptions, but also don't say, I know how you feel when they're telling you about something important, or minimizing by saying you'll be fine. Also, don't step outside of your role or relationship and make sure boundaries are clear, and also don't overpromise. Most of all, don't worry, repair ruptures in communication openly. There is one more bit after that. So yeah, if you make a mistake, say sorry and work out how you can do it better next time. And finally, with communication. Oh, sorry, there we go. So rather than starting questions with why, try starting with show me or tell me about. This often opens up communication in a way that a young person will feel much more comfortable with. Also asking, how do you feel? What would you like to happen? And what support do you think you will need when looking at particular tasks and projects? Ask them to describe how they will know when they've achieved what they want to, but also be clear about how you will know as well. Check in with them and make sure you have a shared understanding of what is expected and of any issues and the actions that need to be taken, and model positive behaviour in the face of adversity. Show them you will not judge them no matter what their experiences may be, but also be clear about your boundaries as their employer. Next slide, please. Over to Debbie.
How are we doing for time, Ben? Are we okay?
Yeah, you've got a couple of minutes.
A couple of minutes. Okay. So within our PACE employer training, there's a whole section that we do around reasonable adjustments. And Beth hopefully is going to highlight kind of some of the adjustments that we've made in Devon County Council as an employer. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but basically this is the ACAS definition of a reasonable adjustment, mainly in the context of the Equality Act and disability. But if we think about it, the same principles apply when thinking about supporting care experienced young people in the workplace. So when we talk about reasonable adjustments for a young person, this could be around flexible working. Can we accommodate some time off for appointments or something to do with their accommodation, etc.? Can we do a phased induction and introduction to work? And we've already mentioned about a job coach or buddy. When we deliver the training, we actually have young people delivering it with us, and they share some of their experiences around being in the workplace and what some of those adjustments have really meant to them in terms of being able to do the job to the best of their ability once they manage to sustain that. So I'll hand over to, well, we've got another slide I think from Gemma.
One more.
And then Beth,
I'll be very quick.
Beth will talk about some of those adjustments.
Okay, one of the anxieties that often comes up on the day with our employers is around safeguarding, and I think that's something that everyone worries about doing the right thing at the right time for the right person and in the right way. So we just have a brief conversation about this, but we do talk about it across the course of the day because this comes up quite often. But I'm not going to read through that entire slide, but what we do talk about is making sure that you reassure your young person that it was right to tell them if something has happened, that you really understand what it is they're worried about and why, but be really careful about thinking about, are they safe to go home? Is there someone else to support them? Who can you get in touch with for them or to support them to do so to make sure that they're safe? And most of all, there is some contact details, but they are Devon specific, but this is what we share on the day. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks, Beth.
Hello. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly go through what our process usually is, and I've just added in some extra sort of tips and things in there as well as some reasonable adjustments that we have and do make within DCC when we are recruiting. I've approached this from the context of an apprentice. Obviously, there are other early career opportunities available, but they are our bread and butter currently. So the first thing we would do is hopefully ring fence an opportunity for the care experience community prior to it going out to a wider network of people being able to apply. It obviously gives them first opportunity to submit their application. If obviously the application process doesn't go through, then we would then open it to a wider pool of individuals. But it's great to give them that first opportunity if and when we can. It does ensure that individuals from the community are prioritised. They're given early access to roles so that we can support their growth and stability. And it is a proactive step towards equity. As Debbie did mention earlier, we do offer a lot of application and interview support. We understand that navigating the recruitment process can be daunting, especially those without the traditional support networks. So we offer dedicated assistance and with application writing and interview prep, which is actually what I was just doing before this meeting. We have a network of volunteers across the authority. We just have a list of people across the authority, across different areas who have offered their time. So when a position comes up and a young person would like to take them up on that offer, we can make it relevant, the person that offers that interview support, that it's relevant to the role that they would hopefully be going into. It's really great for confidence building. And everything like that. Another thing that we do, another helpful little tip, and maybe it could be considered a reasonable adjustment, is that we do understand that the onboarding process can be quite daunting for anyone going into a new job. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of eligibility requirements to hit. especially if they don't know where their birth certificate is. Things like that, it can be really stressful. So we've actually created an onboarding document that talks them through step by step. You'll get an email from this person, it will look like this. We just need you to do this. If you need help, go to this person. So we've really sort of made it clear, made it very palatable, what the onboarding process looks like, and that it's really normal to get absolutely hammered with emails at the beginning of accepting a job and getting onboarded into the organisation. So that's something that we've done. Another handy tip that I'm going to throw in here is start them on a Friday. A full working, if you can, a full working week can be really tiring, can be quite daunting as well. So one thing that we found, and this came from a network of people that I'm going to jump into in a minute, and I'm going to get too excited about it, so I'll do this a bit quickly, is that, yeah, a full week can be really daunting and exhausting. We would recommend get them started on a Friday, introduce them to everyone, show them where their desk is, give them a tour of the company, the building, the location, whatever, introduce them to their team, let them go home and absorb that for a weekend, come up with any questions they might have, and then start the week afresh. We've had really positive outcomes from doing it that way. They're not too overwhelmed. It's a bit more bite-sized. I mean, I recommend it for anyone, but really with the care experience community, it can really help them take out the anxiety on Monday morning because they've done all the logistical stuff already. Another handy tip I would give you as a reasonable adjustment would be to offer a walking interview if appropriate. The movement, the body language, it can really help people relax, and you will probably get a lot more out of them in a walking interview than you might do if you were doing it remotely, and that, like Debbie said, there's the anxiety of technology not playing ball, as it quite often doesn't. Another thing that we do, and the next step of that, is a mentoring program. Again, Debbie did mention additional support that can be offered. We have a mentoring program across DCC, and care experience employees are invited to take part in the mentoring program. It's an initiative that pairs new starters with mentors, and they're often care leavers themselves. So we try and link care experience young people to mentor the new care experience community coming in through the door. It's peer-led, it's a peer-led model, and it fosters trust and relatability, and it just makes them feel a lot more supported from day one. It also offers the line managers a lot of support because it's just another person for them to go to. My advice there would just be to maybe give yourself a list of who's responsible for what and where those boundaries are, because sometimes those lines can get a bit blurred. And then finally, the top right-hand corner of this slide, you'll see a little badge called the Echo Network. That's the name that we have come up. Debbie, no, it was Russell, sorry, that mentioned the word network at the beginning. We have what's called the Echo Network across Devon County Council, and that's a network of care experience young people that work at the authority. They get together monthly, they go for walks. 3 monthly, we get together and we actually have an agendaed meeting and talk about things that are happening, and they have their input. They have their input into PACE, what we're doing today. They came up with the logo, they came up with the name, and they feed into all of the work that we do. Over the last year, there hasn't really been any sort of work that has come up or thoughts that they've had that hasn't been actioned by the authority. And getting that feedback from them and their thoughts and opinions is so valuable in forming the offer that we give them and move forward with. And that's it from me.
Brilliant, thank you, and thanks to all three of you for that. There was some really sort of practical and useful tips in there, and also thank you for condensing a full day into a couple of minutes. I really appreciate that. Russell, so if I could turn to you next, could you just sort of give us a little bit of an overview about how Drive Forward supports your young people and employers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will do it. I'll try and do it without repeating too much, because there's a huge amount of what we do that overlaps with what Debbie, Gemma, and Beth have just presented, which is good because it shows that we're both delivering good practice. I would say that above and beyond many of the things that have already been mentioned, I think what is at the heart of what Drive Forward does is build a trusted relationship between the young person and our career specialists. Our career specialists have a limited caseload, probably lighter than most personal assistants. I'm guessing that Devon might be slightly different, but a lot of the local authorities we work with have quite large caseloads for their personal advisors. So we try and keep that small. We build that relationship. The very first thing we do is build the trust, and then it is about asking that young person to put themselves into situations that maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise. So that might be a skills development session. It might be going and exploring certain workplaces just so they can get a sense of what they feel like. It's very different in a corporate office to a Thames water plant. They need to understand how these look and feel. And some of that workplace etiquette, which has been sort of explained, that is really important for them to understand. And we also train the employers. So we have a training package that we'll work with our partners. We call them our partners. We try and work with them to ring fence roles or at least guarantee interviews for our young people. We will train the line managers and potentially others in the organisation on a lot of what we just covered, and how we can make that transition into the workplace as sustainable as possible for that young person and for them to feel supported. But we maintain our relationship with the young person when they are in employment as well. So this point about a lot of care experienced young people will be leaving a workplace and going to a home to an empty room. We are there to sort of do that decompression at the end of the day, where you might have had a bad day and you just want someone to talk to that maybe isn't in work. And we also encourage employers, it's already been mentioned, those networks, those buddies systems, really, really valuable. And it always surprises me whenever we do our training. There is usually an individual amongst those people receiving the training who will turn around and say that they are care experienced themselves. It happened last week, a local authority training. There must have been about 25 people in the training. 2 of them turned around and said that they were care experienced. One of them had worked for the local authority for over 20 years, had never told anybody, but they felt comfortable enough in that situation to say. And I think that's one of the other barriers, that organizations don't necessarily know who is care experienced in their workplace. And if they could find that out, and I know that's not always easy and some people don't want to identify themselves, but if they could, then you do begin to build a more relevant and relatable network and buddy system of care experienced young people who are established, connecting to those that are just starting. Look, I think the input from Debbie, Gemma, and Beth was phenomenal. It's an amazing scheme that you've got going on at Devon, and I'd love to pick up and learn a bit more, because there's certainly a lot of similarities that we've got going on. But yeah, really, really, really strong.
Brilliant, thank you. You're right. It's a sort of really, really positive and strong model. James, if I can turn to you then. So we've spoken a little bit already about the difficulties that foster carers can also face. Could you tell us a little bit more about what employers can do to support them, but also how your organisation supports them, including, as you mentioned earlier, your foster-friendly employer scheme?
Absolutely. No, of course. Yes, our fostering friendly employer scheme is something that really is being built to try and support you as employers to take basically a template policy to be able to incorporate into your HR policies that will principally help build some of the flexibility there to show yourself as being an organisation that understands these particular needs, both the flexibility you might want to express and show for young people coming into care. And I think the thing that is most salient, I think, for me, when Russell said lots of these children are going back home, well, they're not children, they're adults, but they're going back home to empty places, and the things that they are dealing with could be the instability of housing, or basically not having enough cash. Something too that Russell mentioned to me last week, that in London apprenticeships can be very difficult because of how housing things go on. I'm going slightly off board from what I was going to say, but having that sense of some of the things are stacked against young people in this, but we see too for foster carers that maintaining employment is and kinship carers, as I mentioned, is really important. Often the financial support that foster carers and kinship carers have in order to help bring up young people is insufficient. And one thing that Fostering Network will do will be does advocate with central government on that, work with local governments too as well in doing that, so that you're creating that sense of stability for those people who will building that sort of care behind that. So we will support any of you with helping develop fostering friendly policies for your services, being able to share our template. We can also help provide training, as has been mentioned, but this is like thinking around the skills to foster is the flagship training that we deliver for prospective foster carers, but there is a sensibility in that is really important for anyone to understand. I mentioned this morning as I was getting on the train to come in, trying to support a young man into employment because he's 23, 24, first child. He and his partner are both care experienced, and he's got me to help on those things, and he's relied upon me. But he doesn't have a lot of other people to do that, and the connections maybe that happen with the local authority can diminish. So finding the people who have this experience within your networks would be really important. And like Russell says, we often find people who've got care experience or who have adopted and they've never shared that, or been adopted, or lived with their grandparents growing up. And finding that network there is really powerful, that for you as employers too can make it feel as though that you really care about them, even if they've been working for you for a long period of time. But some of the key sort of principles of fostering friendly would be building in a few additional paid days leave in a year. So it's not a necessary cost being added onto it, but creating that flexibility so that whether foster carers or kinship carers are taking in a young person for the first time, the kinship carers often, that is a real shock. They weren't expecting to. But foster carers have probably got a little bit more of an understanding because they've chosen to do that. But to enable them to welcome a young person and provide a bit more stability and getting them in those early days, which are really crucially important. Attending the myriad of meetings that might need to happen for that young person through their education or apprenticeships or whatever that looks like, where you're trying to support them. And what our real hope is too as well is, I think I mentioned something called staying put earlier. One thing that we have advocated for is that when children in foster care reach adulthood, that they would be able to remain with their fostering families, because I don't know about any of you on the call, but it was pretty good that I had a home that I could stay in and I could go back to and use as I needed. And increasingly, the age of young people moving away from home is 25 or more, which has a pressure on. It's difficult to recruit foster carers. So whatever we can do, and that's a national issue that is of crucial importance. Why we see local authorities failing around the country sometimes from a financial perspective is often one of the biggest budget items they will be relying upon is residential care for children. And that often stems from the lack of flexibility that they have in finding foster carers, or indeed kinship carers being able to take on children into their home lives. So whatever we can do about making that flexible is really crucially important. So we've got some wonderful employers already on that. We'd love you guys to join. I'm going to put a link in the chat for this, so that you can click in that and book in just a 30-minute chat to see whether this works for you with me and one of the team too as well. And if you're keen to chat with Russell or anybody else, we can also bring some of those things together too as well. If you think like you do one, we'll be willing to try and help you share around afterwards. But it really is a way of you being able to demonstrate your commitment on both sides, because I think we don't wait for a child to come into care before there's a crisis. We want to work more, and increasingly government wanting to work more with families to help children stay, because it is traumatic coming into care, even if sometimes you're coming away from situations that are potentially life-threatening or really damaging. There is always pain and trauma that is involved in these shifts. So the more we can do to create greater stability is of critical importance. And I passionately believe that pound for pound, the most impactful thing that people can do to serve their local community would be to become foster carers, because of the future ramifications that can be in terms of becoming that supportive network for that child. And if you're enabled and given the ability to be able to care for them to the best of your ability without trying to juggle other things, is so important. If I can briefly tell one story for the madness of what can sometimes happen when you're a foster carer. This is now about 10 years ago. A Thursday afternoon, I had multiple calls from my wife. She was at home with our 9-month-old daughter, and I thought I was getting a call to say, why aren't you on your way home, because she's being really difficult. I need some support. Finally, I get out of a meeting and call her and say, what's going on? And she said, I've just said yes to 4 foster children. So I got the tube back from Canary Wharf down to where we were living in in southwest London at the time, thinking, what on earth has happened here? I didn't know we could have 4 foster children come to live with us. But that was on a Thursday. I took the Friday off and called. I said, I can't be here. But I felt an incredible pressure come the next week that I had to go back into work. And I look back on this and like how mad that I felt one of those days. I left my wife, my 9-month-old daughter, 4 children running around and trying to see what friends we could get to come and support, because I felt that I had this responsibility because there wasn't any policy in place to provide for a foster carer to be given that sense of assurance. Look, I can concentrate on what clearly is the most important thing in that week. And those children then remained with us for several years afterwards, or the elder 2 of those, and we instigated family, fostering policies at my work then, and subsequent employers too as well. And I'm pleased to say too, Devon County Council are a fostering friendly employer too. Well done, guys. But it's that sense of there are priorities that need to be put forward, and actually that would have been really much better I was there. And having that freedom that you will have employees who will be juggling stuff already, almost certainly, and putting those things in place will create a sense of real goodwill towards you as employers from a point of employee retention too as well. I think that can't be underestimated. There are hundreds of thousands of kinship carers in the UK. Again, not necessarily sharing that because it's not a badge you wear. They might not be as vocal as foster carers, because foster carers can sometimes be trained themselves almost to become advocates to be able to speak up. But this is a real need, and our fostering friendly employer is a scheme is a real simple way for you to be able to do that. So I will put that link in the chat now for anybody to sign up and have a chat, take it a bit further.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. A very illustrative story there. For anyone on the call, please do check that link out. It is a great scheme. So we've spoken a little bit about what employers sort of can do, but why would they want to? So Russell, if I can turn to you, if I'm a big sort of corporate employer who's hiring with their bottom line in mind, why should I care about this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's the what's in it for me, because we have to get that balance right. And the view that we have on this is that the vast majority of organizations, corporates, they are there to serve a purpose. They have a client group, a customer base, etc. And the work that we do with a lot of our employers, they're actually coming to us and saying, we have a problem in our organization. We have recruited in our own image for many, many, many years, and we have lost the diversity that represents our client group or our customer base. And I think that's probably the number one carrot, if you like, from an organization, is the desperate need to bring people into their organization that are more representative of their client base or customer group. Now, putting that to one side, we've got a group of young people. Care experienced young people are unique. They are unique in the set of skills and experiences that have shaped them and formed them. They are incredibly resilient. They will take any opportunity that's given to them, so long as they believe that it's in their best interest. They will take it and they will run with it and they will hold on to it. Our sustainment rate is 84% of young people that get into roles will sustain those roles for more than 13 weeks, which is a really high sustainment rate. That's higher than general public. And that's because when care experienced young people are given that opportunity, they'll jump at it and take it. So you've got someone that will commit to your business, so long as you're doing the right thing by them, and you are doing all of those things that we've heard from Beth, Debbie, and Gemma. You've got a young person that will commit to your organisation and will work damn hard at it. Beyond all of that, there's doing the right thing as well. And I know that we have got challenges around diversity and inclusion, particularly for organizations that have American headquarters. Diversity and inclusion is a terminology that has sort of diminished a little bit. But flip it and let's talk about social mobility then, because for nearly every one of the young people that we work with, them securing full-time employment with an organization, they will have achieved social mobility, or you'll be giving them a very good boost towards achieving it. So think about that kind of ESG, CSR, social mobility, responsibility. That is also something which organizations are valuing and they're looking to do more of. So there are a plethora of reasons why care experienced young people should be given these opportunities, and we should be looking to break down really some of those barriers that do exist, that are false barriers. These are bright individuals who excel in their own way, and it might not be academically, but they will show through their skills and their experiences and their commitment what they can do to an organization. So we just need to diminish those barriers.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I will turn to those very quickly. We've had an anonymous attendee ask, what role can DWP-funded youth hubs play in bridging the gap between care and employment, and how can we strengthen their offer for care experienced young people? I don't know who wants to come in on that.
I can come in on that because we have youth hubs across the county they started off as youth hubs. We now fund them as a local authority, and we have, through our youth hubs, we link directly with our employment training and education personal advisor team. So the whole youth hub team has regular meetings with those PAs, both in understanding the needs of the individual that they're working with, and also how we link the two together. So they will come into the youth hub with that young person. They will do what we call a warm handover, so that they'll introduce the young person to that youth hub advisor. And both of those members of staff will work closely with that young person until they're comfortable to a point where they're just supported by the youth hub. And then we will take over that support and understanding and working with them to identify that career pathway and where they want to get to. The important thing in that as well is that it's not time limited. We will spend as much time as that young person needs in terms of identifying the right support, and we'll work at a pace that supports that young person and their needs. So it's a very flexible offer, but the important part, I think, is that transition or managing that relationship between the PA and the youth hub team, and supporting that young person to a point that they feel comfortable with either service.
Okay, thank you. Russell, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, that's the model that Drive Forward operates. So our career specialists, where we can, it's not always possible, but they will embed themselves into leaving care teams in various local authorities, and they'll work out of that local authority leaving care team premises. The youth hubs, I think that they will be in a similar way. It's about having the services that young people, care experienced young people and others would find valuable all in one place. I had some conversations with a range of partners around the youth hubs, and mental health was something that kept coming up time and time again. And is there something that we can do within the youth hubs that supports mental health, something with the potentially DWP, potentially then PAs and people like ourselves, if there are charities doing similar things in local authorities. So it makes it as easy as possible. And I think youth hubs, that we've got to also find a way of creating, the middle of the Venn diagram between the leaving care hub and a youth centre. What differentiates it as different from both of those.
Brilliant, thank you. And that takes us to time. I'm sorry we've not been able to get to the other questions in the chat, but that has been a really, really helpful and informative webinar for me. I hope you all have thought the same. All that's left for me to do is sort of say thank you to everyone who's been on the webinar today, all of our panelists, and to all of you for joining. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.